Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for being here today. My name is Mary Ann, and I'm really excited to be moderating this super important conversation. Now, a little bit about me. I'm a storyteller, youth advocate, and my work often lives at the intersection of community, media, and justice. So, over the years, I've worked in radio, podcasting, and overall youth development. And I've always had a focus of amplifying young voices and making complex issues feel a little more accessible and human. So, to those of you who listen to podcasts, particularly African podcasts, you might be familiar with Radio Workshop. With the support of Radio Workshop, I produced a three-part series called I Will Not Grow Old Here, basically sharing the story of my life and looking at youth unemployment. You can find Radio Workshop on all streaming platforms, and for all MTN users, you can listen to all our stories for free using the MTN Ayoba app. Now, it's been proven time and time again that real change actually starts when we start to show up together, when there are policy windows and when there's a call from the community, and even when things are uncomfortable. That's why we've given our community a serious glow up. So, community isn't a place, an ideal, or just something we say, it's something we do sisonke. Together, I like to think of it as a verb. So this community talk isn't just some regular webinar where you come and go and almost forget everything that was spoken about. No, no, no. This is part of a powerful series that's all about how we, as young people, shape our communities. And that's so important because very often we're told the youth are the future, but what are we doing today to make sure that that future is exactly what we want it to look like? And how do we stay even when things are getting tough? I mean, it's easy to feel like we're alone all the time, but there's so much power in doing community together. So this campaign is designed by Youth Capital and the Department of Trend. For those of you who don't know, Department of Trend is a strategic trend and futures focused agency. They've just released a future of work report because you're attending today, Department of Trend has kindly agreed to give you all access to this report for free using the code Future100. So head on to their website and see what exactly did they find when looking at the future of work. Now, if you don't know about Youth Capital, they also work with young people across the country to drive campaigns that advocate for policy change to solve the big issue of unemployment. We're all insiders when it comes to the issue of youth unemployment. I feel like we all play a role, and this community right here is a space that we use to connect, learn something new, and find inspiration to take action. Today's conversation will unpack how we show up in protest, in presence, in uncomfortable moments, and how networks and care and connection are helping us build sustainable futures. Remember that you can post your questions in the chat box. We have our technical team, Chloe and Siba from Youth Capital, who are holding it down so we don't miss anything you might have to say or even ask. Now, while I introduce our speakers, I'd like you to drop your name in the chat box. Let us know who's in the room with us today. Um, I know it's 6 p.m. and a lot of you are probably coming in from work, from school, and just a long day overall, but I really need you to have your listening ears on because we've got three powerful voices joining us today, each speaking to different but deeply connected parts of the community puzzle. First up, we have Mark Haywood, who will be helping us think through participation. What is participation? Is it voting, protesting, and the different ways we engage with democracy in real life? We'll also have Savannah Cozy, who'll speak to emotional presence, how we learn to stay even when it's tough and uncomfortable. And lastly, we have Ian Mangenga, and she'll be sharing or rather presenting to us on community-based networks and why these structures might just be the true backbone of work across the continent. Each of these speakers bring a very unique perspective, but at the heart of their stories is the reminder that community isn't just a moment, it's a practice. After the presentations, you will get the chance to engage and ask questions. Now, another big hello and welcome to those of you who just connected. This is the first of many community talks, a campaign developed by Youth Capital in partnership with Department of Trends. My name is Mary Ann and I'm from Radio Workshop. Do not be shy to use the chat box to ask questions, drop comments. We really want to know what's on your mind throughout this entire session. So I think we can get right into it. First up, we have Mark Haywood. He'll be unpacking the question a lot of us are asking ourselves, what does participation in democracy actually look like today? Is it about voting, protesting, or something more day by day and grounded in our regular lives? Mark, over to you.
Thank you very much, Marianne. Can you hear me?
Yes,
It's
100.
uh, it's really a privilege to be part of this conversation tonight. And thank you to Youth Capital for organizing it. And thank you for introducing it. I'm joining you all from Oxford, in England. Uh, and I want to start by betraying my age and saying that Oxford University was where I studied 40 years ago, in 1986. So that makes me one of the older people who are part of this discussion tonight. But I think its relevance is that Oxford University is the place where, as a young person, I first became involved in politics and first became involved in activism. It was in the 1980s that I joined our struggle in South Africa for liberation, but there was also a lot of protest and participation and ferment going on in England at that time. There was great big strikes by the mine workers, by the print workers, and that's where I date my activism as a young person too, and I have sustained it for a long time. But the first thing that I wanted to say this evening is that I think that I became an activist involved in politics and human rights and social justice by choice. I had other options available to me in life. Actually, I wanted to be a poet. I wanted to be a teacher of literature. But I fell into struggle and I fell into human rights. But I feel that today, for young people, the choices are fewer than they were in my days. I would even go as far as saying that activism has become a necessity of sorts. And the reason that I would say that is because the world has changed very dramatically, and particularly dramatically in the last 5 or 6 years. We're now living in a period of what some people are calling a polycrisis, which is fancy words for multiple crises happening in the world at the same time. A worsening climate crisis. We're probably going to see growing wars, terrible wars. We're already seeing a terrible genocide in Gaza, terrible civil war in the Sudan. We're seeing mass migration. We're seeing mass unemployment, particularly of young people across the world. And all of these things mean that I think if as young people we don't try to participate, if we don't try to shape the world around us and to shape it better for us, the world will be shaped without us, and it will be shaped, unfortunately, against us and against our interests as young people. I put this particular slide up. It was a cartoon that appeared just after the United States election that saw Donald Trump elected. And it kind of speaks for itself. The joke is that the wolf now is no longer dressed in sheep's clothing. The wolf simply says, I am going to eat you. And people voted for the wolf, or more importantly, as I'll explain in a minute, millions of people didn't vote at all, but by not voting at all, they let the wolf into power, or they helped to let the wolf into power. So colleagues and friends, my argument is that we have to stand up, we have to participate, we have to organize, we have to make ourselves felt. The question is, how do we do that, and how best do we do that? I'm just trying to move on to my next slide, but getting stuck. Um, the question is, how do we, apologies for that. The question is, how do we do that? And I wanted to talk a little bit now just about activism, because I think sometimes activism is a scary word, particularly for people who don't think of themselves as activists. Some people think that activists are gray. They're people who don't have any joy. They're people who don't have any fun. And my argument is that activism is the opposite of that, that activism is actually expression, it's imagination, it's dissent, it's connection, it's conversation, it's persuasion, it's dreaming, it is trying to develop alternative systems and ideas about the world, and that is particularly necessary in today's world, given the way today's world is marginalizing young people in this world. And on the right-hand side of the slide, I just gave an example. I don't know how many people have been watching one of the things that's happening in England at the moment, but there's a fabulous Irish rap group called Kneecap. See their film if you have a chance. And they're being prosecuted. One of them is being tried criminally because at a concert he stood up and supported Palestine and condemned the genocide. And the response of Kneecap has been to go on to a campaign that draws upon imagination, that provokes, that challenges, and that has drawn lots and lots more people into conversations about what is happening in the world. So activism is not grey. Activism is about communication and construction. And that brings us really to the kind of core of what Youth Capital asked me to talk about tonight, which is, well, what do we mean when we talk about activism? What do we mean when we talk about participation? How do we engage in political systems when, as young people, we feel as if the political systems offer nothing for us and as if the political systems are alienating us? Now, if you look at this slide, you'll see a strange thing, which is that as more and more money gets spent on politics these days, fewer and fewer people vote. Uh, Politics, in many respects, has been captured by elites. Elites have captured politics and they have captured often populations with misinformation, and democratic participation has gone down. I mean, we're watching what is happening in the United States at the moment, but one of the things people don't mention very often is that in the United States, 90 million eligible people did not vote at all in the 2024 presidential election. And most of those people were young people. In our election in South Africa in 2024, there were 40 million people who could have voted, but only 16 million people actually went out and voted. And I've forgotten the exact figure, but the numbers of young people, the numbers of people between 18 and 20 or 20 or 30 who voted was absolutely minuscule. So we have a challenge, which is how do we persuade people to re-engage with politics and the political system when they think that the political system does nothing to help them. And that brings me to another point, which is, well, some people say, I'm not going to participate. I'm not going to vote, but I'll get involved in protests. And protests is participation. It's participation by another means. But for me, the choice is not between voting and protest. It is a question of voting and protest, voting and organization, voting and trying to work to create political parties or independent candidates that give expression to young people's interests and to young people's safety and security in the world. So protest and participate. That's the message that I wanted to put across. And the last thing that I wanted to say, just by way of introduction this evening, is that we need to start to think about new forms of political system. There's a book that's just been published last year. I've put it up on the slides here, Power to the People, Use Your Voice to Change the World. And what the author says in that book is that the cure for the ills of democracy is more democracy. But that will only work if we renew and reinvent democracy's machinery. The very best protection against the rise of autocracy is to redesign our democratic institutions to give people a more meaningful day, to deliver more meaningful say, to deliver more equitable economic development that gives people a greater sense of security and well-being, and so on. And so we need to start to look at what are the alternatives, talk about citizens' assemblies, talk about how we poll, how we organize people, how we stimulate conversation and reshape the political system so that the political system fits today's world. And I think, Marianne, that's where I'm going to leave it uh, from just my few points of introduction. But I think I'd go back to this one critical point, which is that abstaining from political processes is not the answer. The question is, how do we participate? How do we participate effectively? And how do we participate to build young people's power and voice to bring about change? Thank you very much.
Thank you so, so much, Mark. I feel like you've really set the stage so powerfully with what you said. And I think what stood out to me is just you emphasizing the importance of youth participation because it often does play a big part in like creating the future, or rather the change we're hoping to see in the future. But just your presentation and even what Youth Capital, what we've asked in the chat box, which is, do you feel you shape the world around you? Part of my job at Radio Workshop is I work with young people and just kind of teaching them how to cover certain content for radio. And last year during elections, we were just looking at elections as a whole. And I know Youth Capital has this really cool game. If you haven't seen it, please go check it out. Where it's a conversation starter. And one of the questions was, do you feel like the past, so basically apartheid in South Africa, um, plays a role in how the world is looking today? And a lot of the youth kind of were like, no. And that was shocking to me because I kind of felt like, what do you mean no? And it's because their understanding, or rather, they don't really engage with our history and even the political space as much as I think previous generations did. And because of that, it's almost like they weren't aware that them living in townships is because of previous systems. Suburbs being dominated by white people as opposed to black people is because of those past systems. And I asked them, I'm like, so why do you think it's like that now? Because I just wanted to understand why they didn't think the past played a role. And they were like, oh, we just thought those people managed to work harder or were luckier. And I think this just highlights how important it is for young people to get involved because they will constantly look at the world and think it's just like that. It just happened to be like that. We just have to work harder instead of understanding that they are systemically disadvantaged because of their race. And a lot of the past has a lot to do with that. And if they're trying to see a difference, they have to participate now so that the future we're one day going to be in charge of
Mm.
actually looks different. So thank you so much, Mark, for bringing all of that up. And I hope all the young people listening are ready to be active and actually participate in whatever shape or form makes sense to them, because not participating is not the answer at all. Moving on, we do have Savannah, who's inviting us to think about what it actually means to stay present, especially when things get uncomfortable. I think Mark has spoken on that a bit. I mean, young people aren't voting because it's uncomfortable, it just feels useless. So, what do we do when we're in that space of discomfort? And how do we sit with discomfort in our communities? Why is that so important? Over to you, Savannah.
I started sharing and then I realized I didn't unmute myself. So take two, the not so tech savvy is trying again. Tell me if you can all see me this time.
Yes.
Amazing. So community is much more than belonging to something. Community is about more than that. It's about doing something together that makes belonging matter. As you can see on the screen, today I will be sharing about community being a verb, learning how to stay when things get uncomfortable. By way of an introduction to everyone, my name is Savannah Kotze, and I am a qualified attorney that made the transition into the social impact sector. I have now these two incredible communities, as you can see on the screen, the Education Outreach Foundation and Socially Gathering. To give you a bit more about what these two communities are, the Education Outreach Foundation is a nonprofit organization that provides access to digital literacy and education opportunities to underserved communities in South Africa. We truly believe that education is a way of unlocking opportunity, as well as Socially Gathering. Socially Gathering is currently South Africa's biggest female networking platform, and we believe in two core values, being intentional and being inclusive. For us as a business, there's two arms to Socially Gathering. The one arm is you can come to our space to find female friendships, and the other arm is intentional and inclusive spaces for women to network in business. What's important here is to say while these two communities are my jobs, I am involved in a lot of other communities because I've always believed in the value of communities. And to name a few, Global Shapers, Global Change Makers, Young Leaders Connect. I'm a bar instructor, so my community where I teach and raise the bar. I think that community is a value that I've always believed in, but it is something that I'm learning to stay when things get uncomfortable because they do get uncomfortable very often. But it's important to know that being part of a community, you need to give effort and you need to be willing to exchange. And we'll unpack that a bit more. I think I should share a story here about what happened at a socially gathering event. So, as I mentioned, it's a female networking platform, and I had a lady come to me. She'd been to a couple of events, and she said, Sav, I've been loving coming to the socially gathering events. I'm meeting such incredible ladies, but I'm really struggling to connect with them afterwards. I haven't really made plans with any of them afterwards. And my first question to her was, have you reached out to any of the ladies that you got their numbers or you got their social media profiles? And she said to me, no. And I think that was such a great example for this context because she didn't make any effort. She didn't exchange with any of the ladies. She expected it to happen to her. And that's why it is so important when you are in community spaces to be willing to put in the effort, to be willing to exchange ideas, to learn, to share, to absorb from one another. And as you can see on the screen, this picture here is the two individuals are holding masks and they're taking the mask off, and it's stressful and it's scary. But once they take the mask off, that's where the real vulnerability happens. And I've seen that in all the communities that I've been a part of. You can walk into those spaces and feel that you are confident in what you are joining, or you know that you're going to be able to converse with everyone and that everything will be perfect. But that's not the case in communities. It's about being vulnerable. It's about willing to learn from one another and willing to share the vulnerabilities in the hard times. And when there are hard times, knowing that that is part of the process of growth. I think often we also see with communities is that it's always a high. Another story that I can tell you is that a community that I was a part of a couple of years ago, I found quite difficult the way that the particular individual who led the organization was and how they dealt with conflict. And it was something that was really nudging at me that I need to speak to this person, but I was really scared to because what if they didn't like what I had to say, or what if it was received really badly? But eventually I had the courage to have a really open conversation, be really transparent, and just say to them that I think that maybe this could be handled in a different way. And they received it so well and really understood where I was coming from. And from that, we were able to connect even deeper. That further along down the line, when that opportunity arose, we had connected so much, and there was another conflict that happened, but we were able to resolve it and get an amazing opportunity as a byproduct of that. That so often we forget that it's actually through the hard times that you bond with someone and that you help someone, and that more opportunities can come as a result. If you look on the screen, the lines of life, it is so easy to go by the door to criticize. Everyone can do that. We can all on here can criticize. It's so easy. Similarly to gossip. But it becomes harder to get involved. It becomes harder to encourage someone else, and it becomes harder to help. But we have to make that conscious decision that we want to choose the door that is to help other people. And that's why I keep making the point. It's about effort and exchange. Someone said to me recently that community is also about compromise. that you're not always going to get everything you want from a community or from a network. It's about knowing that sometimes you will, sometimes you win, sometimes you lose, sometimes it's a collective effort for an opportunity that you want or a collective effort for friendship. But ultimately, the byproduct of doing something together, as I said at the beginning, the byproduct of having that belief that you've got something to connect with and makes that belonging matters is so much more important. I then chose this particular image because I think it's perfect to describe community. And I know currently now community is such a buzzword and everyone speaks about the running communities. Everyone's like, oh, I want to be part of this running community or that running community. And I think this image is so great because it's blurry, it's chaotic, we can't really see what's going on, but we can see that it's a running community. And sometimes I think that is the point of a community. It's being part of something that you believe that you can add value, you can receive value from. But the most important part is to be able to show up. In any running race, the most important thing is to come to the start line and to say, I want to be a part of this because I hope to make something better, or I hope to be a part of something that is better. And I think that with all of us, sometimes the hardest part is to show up. Even with the social gathering community, I've had many ladies say to me that they've been so nervous to come to all of these events and to meet new people and to connect. But when they're there, when they've showed up, they say, why have I doubted myself? Why did I ever think that this was so challenging and so difficult? Because it's so beautiful when you're able to learn from one another and to share and engage. And again, it's that constant effort and exchange, especially when there are difficult times. It's that knowing that, yes, as Mark was saying, that in those times when you're going to have to vote for a president or vote for something, you have to come together and you have to work together in order to get that ultimate outcome that you want. And lastly, I think what's important to know is that there is so much strength in community, so much, and I can't emphasize this enough, is that no man is an island. We do things, we are on this planet for a purpose, and that is shared humanity. And that's why I think now that community is more pertinent than ever in the generation of AI and this constant chat of how it's going to revolutionize, it already has. I think it's going to become more and more important, the value of in-person connection and in-person community, more than just online. It's being able to actually do something about it. And being activists, as Mark has mentioned, it's being able to rather be the doers than the dreamers. The dreamers are just going to sit and not achieve what they want. But if you're collectively doing something with a community, that's where the real impact will happen. So I think my final messaging to you is the sentiment that was shared on the very first slide is that community is a consistent effort and exchange. Community really is a verb. Thank you.
Thank you so, so much, Savannah. I think that's really incredible how I think like the big message here that no one's gonna do it alone. I can have all the ideas, I can have all the strategy, whatever, but doing it alone won't get me there. And I think everyone can agree that we all know a change needs to happen. We all know that we want to see a change, but it's easier to talk about it, gossip about the person who's trying to do it alone. But actually joining the movement and helping, that's where we see the numbers go down, and that's where we actually need to start seeing the change. So thank you so much for helping us understand what it takes and what to keep in mind when trying to stick around when things get just a bit uncomfortable. We've been busy here in the chat box. I'm so glad I haven't been having to beg people to participate. I love an audience who knows what they came for. We did ask what exactly people are doing to shape the world around them, and we've had some really cool responses. So one person said, I shape the world by refusing to accept poverty as my destiny. I disrupt cycles when I choose knowledge over comfort, unity over isolation, and hope over silence. Even if I don't control the entire system, I control the energy I bring into the rooms, and energy is contagious. Shout out Lunga. I totally see that. And I do think it's really important to be the change you want to see. I feel like we hear it all the time, but if we don't be the change, then we fall in the line of the gossipers and the laughers and the people who aren't actually doing what they want to see. We also asked what people are doing. What does it look like to see effort, especially when it comes to, community engagement? And someone said changing something comes from having an idea of how it should look at the end. So yes, I am. Oh, that's sorry, wrong answer. Wrong question. This is to the previous question, and they were saying that shaping something comes from having an idea of how it should look at the end. So yes, I am shaping the world by sharing the idea of how I see things, why certain things matter to me, but most importantly, what I am doing to change them or achieve them. That way, the world adjusts to me, brings me into proximity with things and people that share the same sentiment with me, thus shaping itself for me. That's actually very amazing. Please keep the comments coming, keep engaging, and don't forget to drop questions you might have for our panelists, because at the end of it all, I'm going to open a full Q&A and throw the questions in. So come in hot, please, please, please. Once again, thank you, Savannah. Last but absolutely not least, we have Ian, who's bringing in a vital perspective on community-based networks. She'll be helping us think about whether these grassroots systems might be the true backbone of sustainable work on the continent. Over to you, Ian. You're muted.
Okay, sorry about that. All right, I'm just trying, there we go. Share, can you see that? Great. Okay, good evening, everyone. I'm so happy to be joining Mark and Savannah and having such a vital conversation. My name is, sorry, I just need to figure out how to move it. Yeah. My name is Ian, and I am a social tech designer. And briefly put loosely, to explain that title, advocacy is what I do, tech and design is how I do it, access and inclusion is why I do it. I'm the founder of Digital Girl Africa, a digital assurance network for women gig workers in Africa. And I'm happy to be presenting on this topic, especially right at the back of releasing the Future of Work in Africa report with Department of Trends. So I'm hoping that if you weren't considering clicking the link and checking this out, that my presentation will kind of motivate you to do so. So today, I'm going to be talking about community-based networks. Are they the backbone of work in Africa? And I think that when we talk about work in Africa, we often ask, how do we create more jobs? But maybe the better question that we should be asking is, what makes work possible in Africa? What holds the labor market, this entire system together in Africa? And if we are to dig deep into our history, we'll realize that across rural towns, cities, what continues to hold African communities together and be a lifeline of survival, work, and everything is community-based networks. And one example that I like to lean on when I think about this is stokvels. Stokvels are, for those who don't know, a local financial system where individuals come together to raise money. It's sort of like an informal saving system. You know, a lot of us grew up with close proximity to a stokvel system, and we've seen how it has continued to sustain a lot of families. And today we're seeing a lot of traditional formal financial institutions starting to create products for this. So the reason why I'm bringing this up is because informality and informal systems are part of Africa's DNA in how we live and how we strive for survival. And ignoring that layer alone is one of the biggest mistakes that a lot of international development organizations always do. It's always a transferal of ideas and opinions and solutions from abroad, which completely erase and stifle the organic informal systems that inform and enrich our lives every day. And of course, I chose to use a picture of an African market because it's the most vibrant place you'll ever visit. It feels chaotic. You feel like someone's about to steal your liver, but that's never going to happen because those people are there on real work. And the fact that they continue to be messy without clear guides on how to navigate it, but it is the African mall. It's no different from a Santon just because there's no Louis Vuitton store there. And it's also, and in how it's created, it's so easy to break into that industry because it's anchored on community-based network. All you have to do is have a relationship with someone in the market and you could pop up tomorrow and launch your business. Unlike trying to open up a store in Santon City, And then what this means is that often what we do is we think that because it's informal, then it must be unstructured, then it must be a mess. And so what happens is that we don't actually recognize informal labor. We only recognize and put a lot of value on how formal on work and types of jobs that are created by formal systems. And if we consider the statistic that in sub-Saharan Africa, over 85% of work happens outside of formal structures. And this doesn't mean that it's random. It's actually driven by trust, reputation, long-standing relational infrastructure. And using the taxi industry as an example, I've always been fascinated by this industry because it's actually born, bred, buttered from the people who actually need it. And till to this day, there's never been a tech platform or company that's able to service the demand of mobility for commuters in townships and peri-urban areas that need to get to school, need to get to work as efficiently as taxis do. And I'll tell you this, from primary to high school, I used taxis, and that was the quickest way to get to school. And when I started doing a lot of research about the taxi industry, I started having a lot of respect for it. And even though Uber and e-hailing platforms are innovating the mobility space right now, they still don't serve a huge market. Not everyone can afford to pay a minimum of 30 Rand to move from point A to B. And this is what I mean by informal systems are informal because we choose to continue labeling them as informal. These systems are working, they're thriving, and we need to start thinking about how we change our relationship with understanding what work is, what purpose it drives, and also kind of like going back to our roots, going back to our roots where we are led by communities. And so when we think of informal systems, it's important that we don't consider these as stopgaps because they are structured, they're self-regulated, and they're resilient. And we need to stop looking at informal systems or institutions as if they are the problem and start calling it what it is. It's community-designed infrastructure. And so because of these community-designed infrastructure, in the African context, when it comes to work, we're seeing and globally, we're seeing something interesting happening. We're seeing the rise in mosaic careers, which are built on community infrastructure. And what mosaic careers are, it's young people choosing to do away with the idea of having one career trajectory, one job, and that's the job I'm going to choose from grade 8 or 9 when they ask me, what do I want to be when I grow up? And you're stuck with that for 40 years. That could never be me. And I know that could never be a lot of millennials, Gen Zs, and Gen Alphas. But this transition that we're experiencing right now is so difficult to navigate because we are trying to move with so much fluid and flexibility in these rigid, firm structures that have dictated for so long how careers work. And also, let's remember, right, that the definition and construction of what a career is was not created to serve the well-being of people. It was created to serve commerce and not community. And so us taking a step back and, reflecting and saying, wait, I don't need to be just one version of myself, and I can choose multiple jobs to express who I am and kind of tap into the life that I want to live. You need to rely on your community. But there are a lot of dangers, or rather there are a lot of challenges with mosaic careers because it's still new and it's still considered informal. Like, for instance, one of the things that I wrote, these jobs like gig work is precarious in its nature. Gig workers don't have similar protective infrastructures as formal or traditional workers do. Like if you are an Uber delivery person, an Uber driver, you do not have access to medical aid. You do not have access to a lot of insurance products that come as stock standard when you're working for a corporate structure. And this is why in Digital Girl Africa, our pivot really focused on servicing gig workers as a digital assurance network, because we do see that there is going to be a rise in mosaic careers, and we need to be part of the ecosystem that curates a supportive network community for these people. And I know that I'm going to be having a lot of chats with Savannah after this, because she's also curating a community that is very essential for the type of work that we're seeing in Africa today and globally. So what this means is that we're no longer dealing with a unilateral way of work or industry. Now we are talking about hybrid work, where old wisdom meets new tools, right? And what I love about this is that it's not exactly a collapse of old system. It's more of like the evolution, where we're seeing workers in Africa blending ancestral models of mutuality with digital tools. I think of how women working in factories or firms have always had side gigs. Side gigs and being a girl boss is not a new phenomenon. It's always been there. If you've ever used a bus or a train, you always notice that there was always that lady that was going to an actual job, but she was selling something in the train or the bus, and now through technology, she's able to innovate. She doesn't have to carry her second side hustle in her bag to her main hustle. She can just manage all of that on WhatsApp or on her Instagram. So it's not necessarily, the idea is not for us to do away with traditional modes and understanding of work, but it's for us to find the sweet spot. Where do these meet? And I think the scale that I like to use is if it's bringing to our community more than it's taking away, then it's good for us. Because if it's taking more than it's giving, surely it can't be for us. And for my last slide, I want to leave you with the quote that the future of African work is communal, not corporate. So are community-based networks the backbone of work in Africa? Absolutely, because they make work possible. They offer trust where institutions don't. They respond faster than policies. They are how people adapt, survive, and build meaningful careers in the absence of linear job paths, especially in a country like South Africa, where we're always churning out graduates in high numbers, but we don't have enough jobs to suck them into. So what does that mean? We are not the problem. The system is the problem. And maybe it's in how we look at the system and how the system continues to erase the importance of the community in it. Yeah, that's it. Thank you so much.
Shout out, Ian. I think you said so much that's so relatable. You just started speaking about the taxi. I was like, oh, child, I wish I could go back to those days. I'm definitely spoiled by Uber, but it was so convenient. I always got to places on time compared to now. And it just worked. So I really think you touched on so many important points, especially when you said the only thing that makes informal businesses informal is the fact it's that title. They've been around for years. They've been working for years. Late last year, I was part of this like workshop thing, and they were talking about Gasinomics, which was basically looking at, the township economy and how people have been able to take their kids through school, pay their mortgage with the businesses they've started for themselves, whether it's from the markets you're talking about or um sorry, family time can be a bit problematic. The baby walked in. Sorry about that. But yes, you really did touch on some really important points, and a lot of them were incredibly relatable. Now, before I completely open up the Q&A for everyone to really get into what they, stood out for them in our conversation, I want to let everyone know that we do want to have this conversation go on. At the beginning, I did say this isn't a webinar where you're in today and by the time we say goodbye, you've completely forgotten everything we discussed. No, 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 no. We want to keep this going because one thing about keeping community going is staying in touch, staying together consistently. And so we want to give you guys the opportunity to take these reflections into your own meetup. I'll definitely be giving more details on that a bit later, but we are going to drop the link in the chat box for those of you who are interested in keeping the conversation going and maybe starting some stuff together. So do sign up using the link and we'll share more details on that a lot later. I want to go right into the questions. We do have one directed at Mark. It says, what usually sparks action in you when something feels overwhelming or out of your control? I think the overwhelm breeds apathy. How do you overcome this?
Um, I think what inspires action in me is that I'm continually inspired by other people. We talk about networks, but there's always something to learn from other people. And there's always something to benefit from having a discussion and working with other people. The combination of your ideas is always better in discussion than it is just by struggling with something by yourself. The other thing, Marianne, in answer to that question is I've always been struck, we feel so powerless a lot of the time as individuals, and yet we have so much power if we just find where that power is within us. And, in a country like South Africa, we're very fortunate at the moment that we have still a constitution that gives power to people in many, many ways, and we should use it and we should take advantage of that space. The last thing that I would just say is that, in my personal experience is, I've come from a fairly privileged background in life. As you can see, if I went to a place like Oxford University, but paradoxically, privilege has taught me even more why equality is so important. Because if you understand the beauty of the world, what the fruits the world has to offer, then you understand why everybody should be able to have access to that. And that's why I constantly feel outraged by what we see of people who, and especially young people now, who are denied year after year after year basic opportunity. And we have to take it into our own hands to change that situation, as Ian and Savannah has said, because nobody is going to find the solutions for us.
Thank you so much, Mark. That really is true. Your closing words, that no one is going to find the solutions for us, and that's why this is a series and not just a one-time community talk. Our next question, and I think it's open to the entire panel. So Ian and Savannah, do feel free. I do think it kind of pushes on what was pointed at Mark. It says, if your behavior became the norm in your community, would the community grow stronger or weaker?
Can you
That's a
please
big
repeat the
question.
question?
It says, if your behavior became the norm in your community, would the community grow stronger or weaker? Hmm, that's a big question.
I'll go. I think if my behavior became the norm, it would definitely be stronger. I've been working in civil society for over 10 years. And I also like to think, similarly as Mark, that I fell into activism. And it was also a space that kind of honed my ideas and just and nurtured me and carried me, because I knew what kind of space I didn't want to work in, because I didn't believe in the change that I was seeing those careers creating. And I kind of like forged a space for myself. So, and having created Digital Girl Africa, which is an extension of my ideas and the kind of world that I would like to see, where women are empowered in the digital economy, I have no doubt that it would be strong.
That's incredible. Thank you so much, Ian. Savannah?
I really love what Mark has said in reply on the chat, because I think that that is so true. It's how you enter into spaces, and if you have good intentions and if you have a heart that wants to do good and is constantly speaking up, and you're constantly changing the narrative, it feeds off into other people. You feed off people's passion, you feed off people's good energy. You are drawn to people that are inspiring and are making an impact. And I would like to think that my behavior, by choosing to show up every single day and choosing to be active in what I believe in, that it would somehow, even to one person, have a ripple effect to be inspired or to encourage them to go after what they believe is important.
Okay, that's great. We have another question, and it says, Ian, how can our informal communities use technology in a way that serves our African markets? With things like algorithms in mind, how do we not conform and stand out?
Thanks for the question, Corinne. I really love it. I'm doing a lot of research and writing on critical algorithm studies right now, and this is a very relevant question. You know, so it's kind of like a double-edged sword when it comes to AI. I'm not I definitely am a big fan of it, but I also like to make people aware of the challenges, because it's only through being aware of the challenges are we able to mitigate and kind of like come up with solutions before things get bad. Because what tends to happen with technology is we find a new product or innovation is introduced, and society or the tech world throws a lot of buzzwords at it to kind of like create this noise around it, which makes it impossible for us to really be critical about that innovation and the dangers it poses. For instance, like AI, it's definitely great for the world where we're going, for the direction that we're going in and for where the world is right now. There's an influx of information. There's bots everywhere. So being able to have a personalized experience cuts down your time a lot. And even when it comes in the working sense, right? It's great to have AI. It's great to be able to take 30 minutes to do something that usually took us a week to complete. But there's also downsides to that. And I feel that most of the time when we look at the downsides, it's always downsides that affects the global market, but never really localized a bit. So when we look at AI, we're going to need more power to operate AI. The more everyone adopts AI, the more everyone increases their AI literacy, that's more resources required from us. And the conversation we should be having then is then, what does this mean for the environment? And when we start bringing in that conversation, the first people we should be considering in that conversation is rural and marginalized communities, the so-called informal communities that you asked me about, right? And even though your question was about how can they incorporate this, right? It's also about like, how do we make them aware of the challenges and the dangers that they can experience? And then from the more practical side, when I said it was a double-edged sword, as much as we need to be aware, we also need to use it, because currently AI doesn't have enough representation. It doesn't have enough data that is representative of all views, all life experiences. That is the goal, even though we might not reach it, but we need AI to know what a 7-year-old boy in Rwanda's experiences is with traveling to school, so that we can be able to have more inclusive and socially just digital experiences. So when it comes to how can we leverage technology, it really is about engaging with the existing tools so that we can train them as much as possible, and the innovations will kind of come out from there.
Thank you so much, Ian. We this was a really great conversation, and I do think we're reaching our closing point just because we have 3 minutes left. But what I'm hearing is that through all these stories and even the questions and engagement, there is like some tension between action and patience, discomfort and staying, and individual work and collective care as a whole. I feel like Mark reminded us that participation looks different depending where you stand. Savannah really opened our minds to what it looks like to be present in those hard moments. And Ian really grounded us when it comes to networks and overall showing us that the strength of a movement is often in its quiet, steady relationships. So thank you all for your participation. Before we say goodbye, or rather open up for final thoughts from our panelists or guest speakers, we're inviting you to take what sparked your mind today. So everything you guys, there's been a lot of engagement in the chat box. So I know a lot of minds have been sparked today. And host your own reflection meetup / community talk of your own, a space with your friends, your peers, or community to unpack and build on the themes we spoke about. I mean, people can share interest in the meetup in these meetups, either by hosting one or attending one close to them. The team is sharing a form in the chat box. I think it's already been shared. And we will also share it in our mail afterwards if you're keen about or you're scared to be the one to initiate it. Don't worry. We'll also be sharing a toolkit and a lot more information with you. And we can create a super group of like-minded people. So keep an eye in your inbox. From us, and please do fill out the form right now. I know what procrastination does, and I know it's like 7 p.m., so you're probably going to be like, I'll do it tomorrow, and then suddenly we've lost you in space,
We'll
time,
be sharing.
technology. Oh, I thought someone was trying to speak. But lastly, I guess I'd like to capture final thoughts from our panelists. Just if there's one thing you want us to remember when we're going home from this whole conversation, or from each of you, what would that one thing be?
Shall I jump in first? I think it's been a great conversation. One of the things I would say is it's important for all of us to model hope, that we shouldn't give up. Things are difficult for many, many young people, but it's important to understand that there are solutions to all of the problems. There are ideas and there are resources. And the challenge is, how do we organize ourselves to make all of those things better and to make things work? And that just brings me back to this point that participation is so important. Participation, engagement, trying to understand the world, talking to other people about the world, and finding ways to try to exercise our power as young people. And I know I'm not a young people, but our power as young people in relation to the system. You know, in 1 year's time, there will be local government elections. We can choose to ignore those elections and we end up with the same crooks. But local government is a place where there is so much money and resources that could be well spent on the types of initiatives that Ian and Savannah and others have talked about. We could multiply them so many times, but we have to take that power for ourselves. So thank you.
To add on to Mark's profound words, I think I would say to keep showing up in the good and the bad times, to stay curious, consistently stay curious, and lastly, to do what you can with what you have. Each and every one of us can do something. So to never forget that we have power with just doing what we can with what we have.
And I think I've been well captured by Savannah and Mark. I think it is showing up is a big part of sustaining and keeping your community healthy. And yeah.
I love how you all just bounced off of each other. Community, people, community, we're connected. Thank you once again to all three of you, Mark, Savannah, and Ian. I really think you've showed us how to show up, to share, and to hold space. And I think to all our guests, thank you so much for being so active in our chat box. This has probably been one of the most engaging online sessions I've ever participated in. So let's keep building together in real life, in reflection, and in community. Take care and see you all in the meetup. Thank you to everyone who's already filled out the form. For those of you who haven't, please make sure you do so we can keep in touch. My name is Mary Ann, and I look forward to seeing you in our next community talks. Thank you.